Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, first, we have to apologize. My co-hosts, Stabby and Nick, are absent. Apparently, the Border Patrol wanted him to go pretend he knew how to drive boats or something down in Florida. So they are both out of town and unavailable at the moment. But if I could just convince the Border Patrol that they didn't need to worry about internet security and just let him connect to whatever I wanted him to, we'd be fine. So if any of you could just message your congressman and like get the JR Handley exception for me or something, that would be great. And with that, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home. So we're going to start with you, Mr. James JE Pitman.
Oh, put me on the spot already. Hey, guys, I'm James, as he said, JE Pitman. I write the Felix Chance Darkly Cozy Urban Fantasy series, home to a bunch of creatures, most of which we're going to talk about today, and also on the side a little bit of, you know, esoteric sci-fi, little action stuff going. So happy to be here talking about all kinds of crazy things.
Freaking standing next, we have Miss Jana S Brown. Sometimes she has other personalities. We'll never know which one we get today.
Well, today we're going to focus on Jena Rey because she's the one that writes urban fantasy, science fiction, and fantasy, and that's where most of the creatures come in. I do put creatures in some of my romances, but we'll see if that comes up or not. But I'm excited to be here. I love a good creature feature.
All right, next we got the outlaw author himself, Mr. Jesse James Fain.
Hey, everybody. I am Jesse James Fain, the outlaw author, as JR was kind enough to say. I write mill sci-fi, urban fantasy, science fiction fantasy, pretty much anything that has any kind of cool premises. I focus mainly on fights and revenge tales, including a half Native American and half Viking skinwalker, which is why I would like to talk about today's episode.
Outstanding. Last but certainly not least, we have Mr. M.D. Boncher.
Well, we'll figure that one out. I'm M.D. Boncher. I write science fiction in a pulp punk sort of vein, and I also write dark epic fantasy, and I am a firm believer and user of North American myth, cryptids, and mythos, as well as lumberjack lore in that series, because why not? They're awesome. Elves and dwarves and dragons, everybody else does, so I let them do that better. So I went with North American myth and had chosen some fun critters to put in that. Unfortunately, one of my favorites isn't on the list, but we can maybe slide it to the side.
Why isn't it on the list?
Well, it's on the list. I provided you with the list of stuff.
Yeah, all those lists will be in the show notes. All right, the next part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we first found them. It's been a while, but what you don't know is we're all part of a secret society that is the mission is to hunt down all of the Bigfoot menace that plague our North American forests. The fact that you have never seen one is proof that we did a good job. You're welcome. Please pay us.
Woo!
I know nothing. Plausible deniability.
Absolutely. All right. And since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we do have the religion question, but we're going to keep it on topic today. Since you've been here and you've answered all of the religion questions several times, you're repeat offenders. I mean, guests. I mean, friends. So we're going to ask you, what is your favorite North American monster? We're going to go in order, I guess. James.
Well, you know, Felix's besties with Sassy Pants, a.k.a. Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever other names I've given him in the series. So much so he actually has a spinoff coming out, and he was one of the major stars of the sequel, Second Chance. So definitely Bigfoot is my favorite, my go-to, just because there's just so much rich legend around him, and I have a very, I won't say personal connection, but there was a hilarious incident at my former place of employment that involved Bigfoot. So he gets my vote for favorite.
Are you going to tell us about this Bigfoot shenanigans?
If you like, I can go ahead. I wanted everybody else to get their favorites out of the way first, but
No, you've teased the story. You got to tell us now. We all want to know.
it's also a deep.
It's true.
But sure. So I used to work in a local TV station, and there were some cryptid hunters who claimed to have evidence of Bigfoot near one of our nuclear power plants. And, because it's a nuclear power plant and everything, and they decided, hey, we're gonna bring you some guys some evidence, got some Bigfoot calls, got some photos and everything. Well, they brought a disc to the station, and apparently it was cursed because every computer that tried to open it crashed and ate the disc. Each time we were able to get it out, we tried another computer because, of course, we had to see what was on this disc, what they were talking about, because they showed on their laptop, same disc. It worked fine. Then we stuck in my friend's MacBook, it's one of those little slot load, and it ate it for a week. Pushing the button to get it out, everything. So, like, okay, nope, this is toast. But a week later, it finally spat it out. Never actually found out what was on the disc.
Okay.
Russian spyware.
Probably.
Very
All right. What about you, Jenna? Your favorite North American monster?
My very favorite is the tiny, tiny little jackalope. I think that they are adorable and fierce, and they're kind of the North American cousin to the Vorpal rabbit, and the Vorpal rabbit is such a delightful thing that I love me a jackalope. And since I live in the desert Southwest kind of area, I'm up in Utah, we have them everywhere, and I've chased enough jackrabbits and enough could-be jackrabbits that the jackalope is just my very, very favorite. It's cute and fierce all at the same time with the sharp, pointy teeth and the big horns. So has to be a jackalope.
Okay. Next, we have Mr. Jesse James Fain.
I'm a Georgia boy, and we have the Altamaha River, and we have Alties. And Alties are kind of like Nessie, I guess. They're a river monster, kind of serpentine, kind of dinosaur-ish, I guess. And that's definitely my favorite.
Okay. I've never heard of that one, so I had to do a quick Google to spell it. So I will throw that in the hashtag. So you've got that. Okay. What about you, Mr. Boncher? I'm going to keep saying it with like Frenchy French accent I can do. Oui, oui.
No, oui, oui. You. Anyway, I guess I have sort of on two minds of it. There's the monster that scares the crap out of me and is ultra cool, and then there's the one of going, oh, I wouldn't mind running across that in the dark woods. So I'll go with the one I wouldn't. That's sort of the way Jana went, and that is the tree squeak, which is out of lumberjack lore. It's basically a big weasel with chameleon abilities that hides in treetops and has a similar personality to it, but it makes sounds similar to that of tree branches squeaking and squealing up in the top, and they can even sound like trees breaking or cannon fire. They imitate sounds like that. So that's my favorite for the not going to slaughter me creature of North America myth.
I'm gonna go with the Bigfoot too as mine, but mostly because I grew up. I remember watching Harry and the Hendersons, the Bigfoot from the 80s, the Bigfoot who gets adopted by a family. It's a great show. If you haven't watched it, family friendly. It's kind of fun. And I imagine that's how some of those backwoods towns might actually react to that when they get invaded by all the media that are like, let's film this. So I don't know. Those are my favorite. All right. And because we said we're going to do the two, your second favorite North American monster, James?
Thunderbird. I gotta love a good Thunderbird story. Not just because I like the cars, but also because the whole mythos is great.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, straight up.
Oh yeah, Thunderbirds, big deal.
Okay.
Up north.
Yeah, big deal in Pacific Northwest and out west. Not so much in the east where I'm at, but they do exist. It's one of those prevalent myths, and I just think it's really cool.
Okay, Jenna.
Oh, see that now it gets hard because now we're thinking about other things. So, just north of me is Bear River, and there is a Bear River monster that is supposed to be. It's kind of a gigantic fish, gigantic bass, and people always see it on the lake and that kind of thing. So, sticking close to home, I do love our Bear River monster, Bear Lake monster.
Okay, Jesse.
Kind of similar to James, the Rock, ROC, okay. It's the Inuit version of the Thunderbird, I guess, is the best way to put that. It's the Alaskan Thunderbird. That and, again, being a Georgia boy, giant catfish, the big giant catfish that lives at the bottom of the dam, and if you're not careful, it'll eat you.
I wrote about one of those. They're cool.
Good old river monster.
MD.
Yeah, so for number 2 for me is the one that scares the crap out of me the most, and that's the Wendigo. That is sort of like the apex predator of pretty much anything I've ever read up on Native American myth, as far as I'm concerned. Not only, and I found more than a few stories from way back around the turn of the last century that basically got my hair standing on end. And of course, I had to make that the apex predator of the supernatural critters in my dark epic fantasy, because you gotta. I think there's a rule in there. Something that scares the crap out of you has to be a big bad. And that's one of them. Just the idea of possibly hearing your name called out of the dark woods. Not good. So it goes as second favorite, not one I ever want to experience. Ever.
That's fair. I guess for me, the Bakwas, it's Bakwas, and it's basically a ghost that tempts people in the woods with food. And if you eat the food, you become a ghost too. It's cursed, right? And so I always like the idea of all the myths that are surrounded, like don't eat the stranger's food, because I think that goes back to, you never know if it's going to be poisoned or if it's harmful to you if you've never seen it before. So I think it's kind of a primal thing for humans, the unknown food, and is it going to kill you?
Yeah, well, and that goes all the way back to the Fae, like to where a lot of Americans, trace themselves back to Europe and back to the legends of all of the fairy folk there. Don't take the food.
But food is an interesting one altogether, because culturally, who you share food with and who you take food with determines a lot of loyalties. It determines a lot of other things, because if you bring someone to your table and you feed them, those are old rules of hospitality. Yep. And so it's an interesting thing when you're dealing with monsters, because in some cases the stories are when you take the food, you end up trapped, bad things happen. In other cases, that partaking of the food is what obligates them to take care of you. So you have to understand your lore, because food is such a primal thing that you've got to know who do you take food from and who do you politely decline. So it's an interesting thing how those primal needs tie into so many of the monster stories, no matter where those monsters come from.
Yeah, and on that note, also careful who you offer food to as well, because if you have your campfire out in the woods, who you break bread with could be the creature that saves you or eats your face in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the Wendigo, for instance, is all around cannibalism in a lot of ways. Not only it's starvation and cannibalism, and basically the spirit of winter in many regards, with its heart of ice. But yeah, and there actually is a known real-world psychosis called the Wendigo psychosis, where people, when they suffer periods of time without food for long times, some of them will have to resort to cannibalism. Whoever they're with dies and they eat the corpse. And there is at least one or two known cases of this psychosis. What makes it the real kind of scary thing is that they will go for human flesh before anything else, even if other better food is available. That's what kind of set people's hair on when they discovered this horrible thing. So, and it's also, for like the Wendigo, it's also one of the few that are truly contagious, and being able to turn you into one of them against your will. So, but yes, that's also another thing. Very cosmic horror aspect to the Wendigo.
Yeah, and they were on Supernatural, so that's where a lot of people saw them.
I've never watched that show, so I think I've heard that once.
Okay, well,
yeah,
it's a good one. I enjoyed it. All right, so
I know a lot of people that do.
The next and last religion question we have is coffee or tea, and how do you take it? But since this is going to be shown around Halloween, what is your favorite seasonal October beverage of choice, Jana?
Oh God, we've talked about a couple of my favorite seasonal ones, but right now it finally, just when we're recording this, we got a nice cold snap through, and it finally smells like fall, and you go out there and everything smells really, really wonderful. And so I have been indulging in just a little bit of hot chocolate, and I have the coffee brown coffee hot chocolate that's got peppermint in it, and holy crap, is that good. And it's really more of a December thing, but it's really good. And they have a caramel version, and that is perfect this time of year. So I've gone back and forth between the peppermint and the caramel. It's really it's delicious.
So can you be basic white girl, and do you like pumpkin flavored hot chocolate, pumpkin spice hot chocolate?
No, I don't actually like that. Now, I love pumpkin spice, but I bake with it. And so this time of year, my husband grinds, because we have our own recipe for pumpkin spice, and we grind all of the different things together, and he makes me a big jar full, and between now and January I will empty the jar with the various things that I will bake that will have pumpkin spice in it. So I do love pumpkin spice, but I want it in pies and cakes and cookies and candies and all that kind of stuff, and not in my drinks. Well, okay, it's good with apple cider, but not with hot chocolate.
You realize that traditional folk medicine says that the spices found in pumpkin spice are also used to ward off evil spirits. So beware who doesn't like pumpkin spice.
There's truth to that.
Yeah,
it smells good.
Take that, making fun of my latte. All right, what about the apple cinnamon kind of flavors that are popular in the fall? Do you like those? And would those actually go with chocolate? I don't know.
They don't go very well with chocolate. I don't like those. That's I want my that spice family really suits better with apple and pear and citrus and all of that kind of thing. You can get some chocolate crossovers that are okay, but I am very picky about my chocolate. I dip chocolates and all that kind of stuff, and it has to be just right. And a lot of times that flavor is not a great crossover with chocolate.
Okay, I'm teaching myself the fine art of cooking, so figuring out what flavors work with what is sometimes a comical trial and error.
It's true. That's how we all learn.
that's an expensive learning curve right now in this economy, so I just plug all of my friends that cook better than me and random grocery store calls. Sorry, Jana.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Always happy to help with random grocery calls.
All right. What about you, James? Favorite seasonal beverage of choice for the fall?
For the fall, no, I'm with Jana. I like the salted caramel hot chocolate, like sea salt caramel hot chocolate.
Right.
I like that, especially like on a chilly evening out by the bonfire.
Oh yeah,
that's great.
There's something about the smell of a bonfire that just brings the season home for me. All right,
not a trash fire.
What's that?
A good bonfire, not a trash fire.
Not trash fire.
Yeah, we don't want to burn trash. That's bad for the environment.
Actual, properly seasoned firewood.
Absolutely. All right, Jesse. Favorite seasonal beverage of choice for you?
I'm a fall guy. I think we got the recipe right. I'm flannels, fires, full size handguns kind of deal, and hot chocolate. It's that's it. That's it for me. You got your s'mores. Maybe you cook some brats on the fire or anything like that, and a nice hot chocolate, a little bit of marshmallows. You're good to go.
Okay, I do love me some bratwurst.
Yes. Staple of my home.
Yeah, I keep a lot of them frozen for any time. If someone comes over and we got to throw up the grill, I'm always ready.
Although it's not good to throw on the grill, you can can brats. You can pressure can those things, and one package of 5 will fill a 1-quart jar, and they are great for shelf-stable meat preservation. We learned that a couple years ago. Yes.
That is, I'm going to take some notes now. Does that mean you have to get them like the pre-cooked, or do they have to be raw?
It's better if they're raw because they won't. Because what you have to do is pressure can them at, I believe it is 15 pounds for 90 minutes. And so if you do canning and you put a whole 5-pack into a jar, no liquid, it will make its own, and it'll cook them for 90 minutes. They come out practically crumble ready. They have a different flavor than what you would have fresh on the grill. But when you're talking shelf stable meat, these are going to last a couple years on the shelf, so you have it as an emergency stockpile, and they're good. They become a very rich flavor, and we've done all types except for anything stuffed with cheese. We haven't done that because cheese gets iffy on the whole canning thing because of dairy. But
yeah, I've been mostly canning soups and stews.
Great move.
So I had a lot of stuff with life reasons. I had a lot of stuff that was going to go bad soon. I'm like, I can have a giant party and cook a whole crap ton of food, or I could can it and save, go from stuff that's about to go bad because it's been in the freezer, close to the edge. It was still fresh, but it was gonna go soon. If I can it, I get another 3 to 5 years out of it. So I started canning. I've got like 57 quarts of canned soup. I have fun doing it, but I will pop them open and eat them too. So it's not like they just sit there collecting dust.
Gotta cycle them.
Yeah, I got to get a better system to like label them, because right now I just put tape on the lid with the date and what it is. But if that ever comes off, I'm screwed. So I got to get something better.
Mm-hmm.
A Sharpie marker on top of the lid will last for a very, very, very long time.
Well, I wasn't doing that because I didn't know I couldn't use the thin metal part of the lid again. I thought you could reuse
don't reuse those. Don't reuse those.
I didn't know.
Yeah. So here's a message for people who are listening to us and going, hey, I want to can. Please contact your local extension service and make sure that you are following the rules, because canning is tremendously fun, is a great way to make food last for a very, very long time. It is also a fantastic way to get botulism and die.
Yes.
So some of these recipes are very specific, things like salsa and that kind of thing. More people get sick from home canned salsa every year than you want to think about, because you've got to have the recipes right. So please, for your altitude, for your area, contact your local extension service. Do not just take random recipes off of the internet, because I do not want to see anybody else in the hospital, and that's the end of that. So just make sure that you are using
food safety is critical. Absolutely.
What is the extension service? I've never heard that term before.
Every state agricultural department has an extension service. They generally run things like Kids 4-H and stuff like that, but they will also have a canning department, and they'll be able to tell you for your area, your altitude, all that kind of stuff. Here are recipes that they have tested, that they've done the scientific thing and gone, how many pounds of pressure you're going to get on a lid. Is this safe to can at home? Is it not? Because there's a lot of things that are canned commercially that your home canner cannot get to the right temperatures. And so people on the internet say, oh, you can totally can butter. If you're going to die, sure. Because the spores that get caught in butter are bad too. So every state will have an extension service as part of their agriculture.
Milk, potatoes.
They will help you a lot to make sure that you are canning safely so that you enjoy it and you don't die.
Mm-hmm.
Not dying is good. I recommend not dying.
Botulism is a bad way to go.
Yes.
So with the canning where it talks about regional, that only comes to once you can it. Once you can it, if you move regions, do you got to get rid of it, or is it good once it's canned?
Once it's canned,
it's generally not a problem. You just have to watch it, because if the seal pops or the seal lessens, then you're going to need to use it sooner, and you can tell that by what's going on in the jar.
Yep. Always.
I had a couple of them
that top and listen to the boing boing.
Yeah, I had a couple of them that didn't quite seal, so those got eaten first. But
that's what you do. Yeah, put those in the fridge, eat them tomorrow.
right now we're in the process of finishing up the canning season for tomato juice for us. I finally get to do my family recipe, which makes me uber happy. So,
Yeah.
and tons of stewed tomatoes. We got a really good crop of that.
I have some 7 dried bean mix that I've got soaking in water to re off them for a 7 bean ham soup that I make.
Yes.
It's
So
really good.
Okay.
And then I'll can a bunch of that. Okay, so about the monsters. Thank you, Jess, for getting us back on track.
Let's get back to the monsters.
Yes, we have canned monsters, and now we've got fresh monsters.
So for my coffee of the season, I finally used the last of my s'mores coffee. So I've been doing the bourbon. And I do enjoy a pumpkin spice latte in October. I know, basic white girl, but whatever. It's good. And so now let's define we're about 25 minutes. Let's play the commercial, and then we're going to talk about what is a monster, and then get into the North American ones. All right. And if you like the canning episode, you're welcome.
The government underestimated the outbreak. The best medicines couldn't stop it. Now, the dead are walking the streets, and they're hungry. Zombie Patient Zero is 9 tales of flesh-ripping, brain-splattering mayhem from Bayonet Books, the boldest name in action and horror anthologies. From deep space to luxury resorts, nowhere is safe. Zip up your hazmat suit and dare to find out how it all went wrong. Zombie Patient Zero, from the deranged minds that brought you Contact This and Storming Area 51. Pick up your copy today in paperback or Kindle.
All right, and I've just thought about it. We're going to justify our canning and homesteading episode because you could do it in space on an alien planet. Boom, we've got our angle. We can nerd out.
Woohoo!
Well,
That commercial is what would happen if, you eat the spoiled canned goods.
See? Populism is a bad way to go.
It stops. That's how it starts.
Nice.
All right. So first, we're going to define our terms. What is a monster? So I asked the Oracle of all things, otherwise known as Herr Google, and I've got the definition from them. All right. So they said a monster is a fictional creature, a type of creature that is often depicted in horror, sci-fi, fantasy, folklore, mythology, and religions, often portrayed as dangerous, aggressive, and having strange or grotesque appearances. They can be large, ugly, and frightening, and may or may not have supernatural powers. Examples of such monsters include centaurs, sphinxes, minotaurs, griffins, wyverns, etc., etc. It could be a monster, can also refer to an animal or plant that has abnormal form or structure. So basically anything that's kind of deformed can be a monster. Then you can have a monster could be a cruel or wicked person who is exceptionally evil. And finally, a monster can also be something that is extremely powered. Overpowered is one term used for it. So according to the dictionary, that is what a monster is. Are we good with that definition so we can start talking the cool stuff?
Close enough.
I'll roll with that.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you think as far as the monsters go? Do you think what exists in North America is different than what exists in the rest of the world? Or do you think there's some level of commonality among all the different cultural ethos when it comes to monsters?
Yes.
Jesse in the side chat. Let's talk about monsters. Okay, let's talk about monsters. Jesse, one word answer. Yes.
Yeah. No. So I mean, there's some universal monsters. We talked about that on other episodes. We talked about that on the vampire episodes. There's some big giant ape thing all over the place. We got yetis. We got honey owls. We got skunk apes. There's a Bigfoot for every piece of the world almost, except for the small islands, and then they climb up out of the sea instead. So that's why I say yes, is it's both. There's some very universal monsters that I think probably either had some solid semblance of history to them, something that was actually real, or they speak to something very deep in the human condition that everybody deals with. I do think that North America is unique in that we, honestly, outside of the Wendigo, I think that we kind of lack as many big nasties. Don't get me wrong, it's also very regional because North America is so big. But we have a lot of kind of weird regional monsters instead of these things that get really complicated names and come and eat the kids at night. We don't have as much of that. We've got much more Mothman, Jersey Devil kind of deal going on, Dogman, where it's just these weird things that you run into that, if you heard it, no, you didn't kind of deal.
I don't know. We have plenty of things that are come and suck your soul out and eat you, especially if you look at a lot of Native American myth and legend. But you also have to give a nod to that a lot of times when I learned this from a wonderful woman named Debbie, who is a Lakota storyteller. And she says the thing that you have to understand about Native American myths and legend is there's rules around what stories you tell, who you tell them to, and when you tell them. And so there's a lot of things that they have that are deep and tremendously terrifying, but they don't get bandied about in the same way because there is kind of a level of respect there as to when you tell them, who you tell them to, all of that kind of thing. And when you get beyond that, the rest of us are immigrants, and we brought a lot of our monsters with us and then meshed them up with where we ended up. And you talk about regional. So, one of my favorites, I write a lot of work here is New Orleans. And New Orleans has this amazing pantheon of monsters, but it's affected by the Arcadians that came down from Canada. And then you had the Native American tribes that were already there. And then you had Haitian, people that were brought in on slave ships and things like that. There was the French there. They were owned by Mexico. By Spanish. They've been owned by so many different things. And all of those cultures have brought different monsters and different heritage into New Orleans. And so their melting pot of what a monster looks like, even the common ones, the loup-garou there, that's a very terrifying werewolf. And it's not like a European werewolf. It has its very own flavor that's because of what we brought in. And you find that all over. Appalachia has so many things that came in with those Scots-Irish. So as you look at the different areas that got settled and how they got settled, we brought monsters with us and then we turned them into something more. So it's a different than you see in places that, like you say, have a smaller landmass where you didn't have so many cultures coming together in a melting pot of here's our primal terror, here's the stories we know, and here's what they turn into once you bring them to a new place.
And the loup-garou, as you mentioned, that actually followed the French voyageurs and the Acadians down from Quebec. And so they have their own version of the loup-garou up there, and that definitely is one of those, don't mess with this.
Yeah, the loopers are scary.
Yeah. I also like the fact that you also have on the other end of that spectrum of the really terrifying stuff, you have the lumberjack lore, the Paul Bunyan myth, which is more done for entertainment and lighthearted. I mean, if you look into the creature, they actually have a compendium of the creatures that are involved in sort of that storyline of myth. And it's more than Babe the Blue Ox. He also had things like axe handle hounds and camp chipmunks. The camp chipmunks always make me giggle because those are 300-pound chipmunks that grew big eating the prune pits from Paul Bunyan's camp, and they fight bears. You have hoop snakes that bite their own tail and roll around like a hoop from a barrel maker. And that's how they travel quickly. You have so you have all this, and then during the late 19th century, early 20th century, you got also pranksters like a timber cruiser that's a bit famous for it by the name of Gene Shepard, who he is the man that created the hodag, which was a absolutely insane thing that's sort of immortalized up in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, of this big frog-like six-legged monster that lived in swamps and liked to eat white bulldogs. And, you get this kind of weird mishmash of things too in there too, that really add more of the North American flavor to it all and what we have nowadays.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind
Fun
of
monsters.
What Anna was saying. It depends on how the stories are used. You know, in the native lore, a lot of it is about honoring and respecting nature and living in harmony with nature. And then what happens if you don't? Versus, so a lot of European descendants would, you know, the Grimm's fairy tales and all the other original fairy tales were to scare children and morality things, to be afraid of the forest. So when the European immigrants made it to the US, they started using what they heard in the native tales as the scary monster to keep you in line and keep you from, you know, wandering into the woods alone or without a gun, or, you know, just, it's just like Mothman is a very interesting outgrowth of that, because, you know, it's originally set up as a native curse from a chief that the American, like European descendant settlers, you know, latched onto as a horror tale, versus no, it's just what happens if you screw around with nature in that area.
I think some of it is that, generally speaking, cultures ebb and flow, and they constantly intermingle and change and sort of, I don't want to say mutate because that implies something negative, but, you know, they're always adapting to what happens around them. So sometimes you get interesting mashups too, when you have cultures that have something similar to this, and then you end up with a third thing that's like both of them, but not quite anymore, which you see. And then and the other one is, and then I'll let you go, MD. The other one is, everyone thinks that the Native Americans are a monolith, but were hundreds of tribes with their own myths and legends and lores. So go ahead, MD, and then Jesse, we're shaking your head no, so you can disagree with me. I'm cool with that.
Oh, I was just.
Oh no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. The Native Americans. That's So I grew up at powwow. My family did Native American style beadwork. We were there. We were selling. My family's Muskogee. That's why I wrote Rune, who's my skinwalker, is to kind of encapsulate my heritage. But no, the natives are nowhere near monolithic. The tribe differences, even among what we call large tribes, is different. The Sioux are not one people. The Comanche were never one people. It's the Comanche were in bands. There was only ever one chief, and he was the last one. I say all that to say that's absolutely 100% correct. And there's legends that outlive their tribe. There's tribes that no longer exist that their monsters still do, which I don't know if that's amazing or sad, but it's the course of history.
Yeah, you mentioned the Sioux. There are three nations in that, if I recall correctly: the Dakota, the Lakota, and the Nakota. I learned that when I actually was working down in Savage, Minnesota, and near the reservation there, and I got a chance to talk to some people off the reservation, and they mentioned that those are the three language groups on top of it all in there. So,
and given how close I am to North Carolina, we realize there are actually, of the recognized Native American tribes, there's actually some that the government doesn't recognize that exist as well, which, you know, is layers upon layers of myth and lore and their monsters sort of intermingling. But yeah, I think that's where you get some of the universality, is because if you look at it like a game of telephone, if you tell the person next to you who tells the person next to you, when cultures bump into each other and then they go and they bump into the next culture, you start to get like drift of ideas and they spread. And that's where I think some of the commonality comes from. As a historian by training, we've learned that there was more of a global market than we thought in antiquity. And so it's not surprising that there's some level of commonality in all of it. And I think it comes down to us trying to understand the world around us before we had concepts and ideas to explain science and nature. So, but not everyone speak at once. You guys can talk too.
Well, you were doing such a good job. Yeah, I also have to wonder, just occasionally, because this is also human nature. When you bring in immigrants, when you have people that are traveling from one place to another, I think some of the monsters that they came up that various people came up with were based on the how do we keep them away from our stuff? Hey, if
Yeah.
we tell them there's a giant monster over there, then maybe the settlers will just go around. And you see that with some places where you can find, certain tales and this, that, and the other, and you go, yeah, that was the parents saying, if I tell them that the ice cream tastes bad, maybe they won't eat the ice cream. So I do think some of these also come up because of either you're trying to keep them away from something, or going back to my girls' camp days, the number of stories that we told the younger girls just to watch them freak the hell out. I suspect some of these monsters start out from that too, because human beings, I mean, how many trickster gods do we deal with? And that's also part of the human condition. We do like to pull one over on each other, and we like that feeling of being just a little bit scared. And so I think a lot of these also come up because you're telling those stories out in front of that fire, and everybody wants to be a little bit scared and a little bit tingly. And so somebody goes, I got a great idea. I'm going to tell them about this monster. And then it grows from there. So we get interesting things that happen because we're natural storytellers. That's how we communicate.
There's something about a campfire in the woods at night that makes this normal story that if we're talking about right now doesn't sound too scary. You sit around the fire at dark with the shadows dancing. Suddenly things get a little bit scarier. And
when there's no screen between you and what could be just out of sight. Yes.
But I think part of that is because, humans that are existing today exist because our ancestors were afraid. So the ones that didn't jump when the twig snapped behind them got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. And the ones that said, oh, crap, and ran lived. And those are the ones that bred. So, and but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, which is why I think we're always fascinated by the monsters of different cultures. So this isn't specifically North American, but let's sort of extrapolate because I'm curious. So obviously myths, most of them died down as we started understanding science and became more developed as societies. So do you think as we get even more advanced and we spread to other planets potentially, do you think the love of those scary things is going to spread? Are we going to end up with the Martian monster or whatever? Or is that going to fade out of human existence?
It's totally going to spread. It's spreading today. Urban legends, come on.
Urban legends are taking the place of the campfire tale.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and not just that, but we run into new things, and this is to this day. If you're out in the middle of the woods and you've never been out there, let's say you're a city kid and you decide to go out there one day, and you hear a mountain lion or a bobcat for the first time. And that it's that god-awful murder shriek, and you don't know what that is, and maybe you see a flash of hair or something darting around in the woods, there's plenty of people that won't accept, I don't know what the hell that was. They have to say it was something. And there's no way that we don't go explore Zeta 229b and somebody doesn't run into something creepy. That's nature has all kinds of creepy stuff, especially the first people to touch a new planet. There's going to be all, how many Moon's Haunted joke memes have you seen? That's just the nature of human beings, is that I don't know isn't always accepted as an answer. And we've proven even with eyewitness testimonies that your brain will fill in the gaps and you don't even know your brain's doing it.
Yep.
Well, just remember, just because the natural can't explain it doesn't mean there isn't a supernatural answer to it, and that can extend to other planets. I mean, even though it's sort of a silly concept in a way, the Ghosts of Mars by John Carpenter is an example of kind of haunted other worlds. And I mean, you then have crazy things, though. I can't watch this movie myself. It's like Event Horizon and What Will Science Reveal or Supernova. Those are three of them where you're dealing with something beyond the natural. So why wouldn't it? I remember once seeing in a gaming book saying that this one group of scientists got infected by the Fae, and that's why we have science fiction, is because a lot of our Fae transmogrified themselves in their little fairy realms into alien worlds and races instead. So I was like, okay, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Well, that's the thing. There's a reason why science fiction and fantasy shifts between being the second most sold genre and the third most sold genre in any given year. It goes back and forth with mystery, thriller, and science fiction and fantasy do this little number back and forth. Romance is always the top seller. And then it's these others where we're asking those questions and we are dorking around with our imaginations, because you can have all the scientific explanations, but then somebody asked what if, and what if is actually what drives scientific discovery, but it's also what drives us into the, well, maybe it was magic, maybe it was the elves, maybe it was the fair folk, maybe it was whatever. So as human beings, we like that question and we like filling it in with lots of possibilities. And that's why any of us have a job as writers, is because we want to think about those possibilities. And then we want to share those possibilities with other people who also want to think about those possibilities. So the power of imagination, I think, is always going to keep us wondering what's just beyond the edge of the firelight.
Well, and nature maintains itself with that too. We've got the Green Mountain National Forest here in the U.S. There's all the disappearances in Alaska. Anybody remember the name of the haunted forest in Japan?
The suicide forest.
The suicide forest, yeah. My point is that there's certain places that, unless we light the whole thing on fire, burn it down, and build a parking lot, it's not going to maintain its grip on a scary place that nature still rules. The Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, the bears are always going to rule the Bob. That's going to be the thick woods, the deep places that if you are not an experienced woodsman, you do not go, because something will eat you or you will get lost and never return. And as long as those places exist, we're going to have that fear of nature, that fear of the forest.
You also have stories coming out nowadays. I've noticed this a little bit of a trend, is where nature refused to be suppressed. Like you said, you take the deep forest and pave it over, but the deep forest comes back and comes through and exacts its revenge. You have those kind of stories starting up that way too. Is modern development cannot stop it. So,
well, in all sorts of places, because going back to New Orleans, there are about 400 to 500 people a year that disappear into the bayou and are never seen again. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole lot of, is it alligators? Is it zombies? Is it what is out there in that bayou? And having walked out there, the answer is a whole lot of stuff, and most of it's kind of terrifying, including the fire ants and the mosquitoes that can carry you away all by themselves. The bayou is interesting. The wetlands of Florida. We say that we've conquered the world as we know it, but really not. Any place you go, they will have places where you go, yeah, this is places where people disappear, and we can't tell you whether they got eaten by alligators or eaten by something worse.
I mean, go ahead.
If any of you ever find me in a swamp, ever, if I'm found dead in a swamp, find who kidnapped me or killed me. That's the only way I'm getting in the swamp. Absolutely not. And I don't even need a monster for that. That is the most miserable place on earth. Go ahead, Andy. That's all I wanted to say.
I was just going to say that since I've moved, so I grew up in Wisconsin and I dealt with the Northwoods that way, but I also dealt with the fact that you could find yourself really terrified in a cornfield, because when it's at least your head height, all of a sudden Stephen King is absolutely right, and you can get lost and terrified in those places. But now that I've moved down to West Virginia, it's like you don't realize how limited of a view of the world you really have until you start going, I've only driven up and down this road, and I've only been to these few spots in a town. I don't know around these areas at all. And there's places like in
his Wi-Fi's been acting up, so we're sorry if he bounces, but
well, to what he was talking about,
the monsters got him.
Yep. All right, he's back. Hold on. Let's let him.
That was weird. That's the second time this connection was crashed on me. So I'm wondering what's knocking me out.
The monsters don't want you to tell their stories. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I'll say flat out that very much can be demonic activity for those that are willing to listen on that front. Oh, that's part of the problem. Something's trying to auto install in the background. Anyway, yeah, program that isn't supposed to. Anyway, yeah, you realize that your real understanding of the area that you live in is only a few hundred yards. Even if you can see it from a ways away, you don't know that territory till you've been at the base of those trees. And disappearing is not out of the question. When I was a kid, I accidentally ran across pot farmers' land in the national forest, and I got lucky to come out of there alive when I was a kid. You know, so you never know what reasons you will vanish if you go out there alone. So, but yeah, moving down here to the wilds of West Virginia, I didn't really feel how creepy the Appalachians could be until I went for a trip down into southeastern Kentucky, right along the West Virginia border, and I went, wow, I now get it. Everywhere I looked, I could practically feel hear little speakers playing the theme from Tales from the Dark Side out from under the kudzu. And some of the places are just like, yeah, Stephen King wrote this place, didn't he? So I get it.
That's the fun thing with the Appalachian Mountains. They're older than the rings of Saturn. Mm-hmm. People underestimate the Appalachians. I think the Rockies are so majestic. The Himalayas, you know, those young whippersnappers don't have anything on the bones of the earth that just are sticking up. Appalachians, the Highlands of Scotland, all of them are part of the original same range. And, you know, when something is older than the bones of the earth, well, it's going to have something that's hanging out there for a while, especially, you know, like I said, if you can't go 100 yards beyond the edge of the road, you know, even if you can see it, you have no clue what's there. It is actually in there.
And then you get to the mines and the caves. What comes out of the ground? Do you really want to dig that well? Really. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a book on ghost stories from the upper Midwest, and some of them are in the Iron Range of Minnesota, and they talk about some of the mining stuff there. And I'm just sitting there going, I know that there are probably stories down here in the coal mines that are twice as bad as that. And those, they made my hair stand on end. So absolutely.
I have family in West Virginia as well, and I've heard the scariest monsters in West Virginia are the Pinkertons, but that's because they got history.
And cause.
Yeah. But do you think that will in the future the monsters, the urban legends, will they continue to evolve from the ones that we've known for, you know, the older monsters, or do you think we're going to start to see new ones pop up that are completely unattached to what came before it?
I'm going to call Jesse out here and say, yeah, I mean, come on, kudzu.
Yeah.
I will just say this. The old gods aren't gone. They only rebranded.
Yep. Think about the creepy monsters.
I'm not familiar with kudzu, so Jesse or James.
It is a vegetable form of cancer. I heard it once called. There's only one plant worse. There's only one plant worse, and I've got 2 clumps of it on my property, and that's friggin' Japanese knotweed. You can't kill that stuff. It's actually a hazmat situation in Britain.
Yep.
But kudzu will outgrow it. It just can't smother it.
Interesting.
So it's basically a vine that covers everything. So especially down here in like Georgia, but really anywhere in the Appalachians at this point, you'll see entire areas that it looks like camo net, but natural camo net
everywhere,
every tree, every bush, every spare inch of ground. It is something that somebody, like if it wasn't a real thing, if you hadn't grown up with it, I could absolutely make a campfire story and turn kudzu into a monster. It just grows over and smothers everything else, and slowly kills and decays everything it grows over. If you chop it, it will grow from the pieces. If you burn it, it will grow from the smoke. And so you kind of just have to like dig a hole and salt the earth around it and pray it doesn't find a way to spread, which eventually it will.
And it grows fast too.
It's like
it is not
bad.
a slow.
No.
If you don't get right on top of it the moment you see it, you're doomed.
It's like a foot a week, I think it is for kudzu.
Yeah, it's ridiculously fast.
It's almost as fast as it might be faster than bamboo.
Yeah. Yeah, bamboo and Japanese knotweed are the only two other plants that grow on the same caliber as kudzu. It's just knotweed goes in these huge bushes and bamboo goes straight up.
Which it's funny because originally it was introduced as a miracle plant because it is great at erosion control.
Oh,
but it likes the climate in the south too much, and it just
natural
outgrows
predator.
everything. Has some good uses. So whenever I actually cut it out of the woods, you can make rope and other crap from it. It's useful for that.
It's strong.
It is very strong. I mean, yeah, if you ever try to pull it out of a tree like I have to, you know how strong it is. Because it will not let the tree go. If I tie it to the tractor or whatever, the tree comes down with it.
Yeah, it doesn't like it out here in the West. It's way too arid for it. But we get deadly nightshade instead, and it'll do the same kind of crap. It grows a lot more slowly, but it wraps up the trees and wraps through everything else, and then you have to pull it out, and it reeks to high heaven.
Vegetable
but yeah,
monsters.
you definitely get veggie monsters, get plant monsters.
Yep.
I would never have thought of plant monsters as a scary thing, although I have seen a Venus flytrap, so I can see it.
I mean, you never Jim Butcher that. Chlorophene.
What's that?
Jim Butcher's chlorophene.
Yep.
That was hilarious. Which actually mimics. If it grows up like a street lamp or whatever, like up the power pole, the guy wires and over the street lamps on the side of the road, it has these dangling tendril vines that in the right conditions it looks like the light's coming from eyes.
Oh yeah, you can definitely see that you feel that it's going to grab you and suck you up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, plant and fungus monsters are something that have always sort of fascinated me for basically the concept. The problem is that they quickly devolve into Lovecraftian level horror, the cosmic horror thing, something that's infectious, gets inside of you, and ugh.
Overwhelming.
I will say that because of I've referenced them too many times today, but just like Stephen King, when it comes to horror, I usually, when I write something horrifying, it's usually something that scares the crap out of me. And that's part of what I did for making my creature for the Waking Nightmares. Is I found some things that horrified me and then said monster, and I'm doing my monster episode. So,
well, that's how you could develop monsters. Why, you can't write something you think other people is scary. You think other people think is scary. You have to write something that actually scares you, because if it scares you, it's going to scare your reader.
Yep, because it gets into your writing, just like the monster gets into you.
So this sounds like one of those topics where you could just talk ad nauseum for hours and still only scratch the surface. So I'm going to have to yeet this episode right here, pull the plug. Is there anything about North American monsters specifically that you think we need to cover before we wrap this up?
I think they're not covered as much as what you see in kind of the universal monster set, like dragons and vampires and werewolves. And I think that's a shame. And if you're listening and you enjoy monsters or you enjoy mythology or folklore, you should absolutely dig into the North American monster set. There's so many cool little, like I said, regional or niche monsters of. We didn't even get into stuff like the Dark Watchers out west, or anything like that. There's literally hundreds of cool critters that we didn't get to cover. Yeah, check it out. There's a lot of cool, deep folklore that goes back all the way to the, like Lewis and Clark days, where people were still trying to figure out what was going on here, and the people that already knew didn't write it down. So check it out.
And you can find a lot of it in Weird West Tales, because you'll find that authors will delve into that, and so Weird West will do it. And urban fantasy, you are seeing more and more series where the urban fantasy is really, really digging into that. The Faith Hunter has got some great stuff, but I've lost her name suddenly. Mercedes Thomas. Anyway, Ilana Andrews. So there's a lot of series that are urban fantasy series that, because a lot of them are set here in the States, they're expanding beyond the vampires and werewolves, because we do see those so frequently, to really start delving into what are some of the other things out there. So that's a good place to start if you're looking for North American monsters.
Patricia Briggs was who you were looking for.
Patricia Briggs, thank you. Thank you. It's suddenly, I'm like, I was just reading the book the other day and gone.
And the guy next to me, James JE Pitman, he's got some too.
And Pitman stuff. So
yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf now. I'm like C.E. Murphy, Urban Shaman, you know, Butcher. He really, you know, like with the Bigfoot stories and talks or listens to the wind and that side of things. He does the Lou Garrett. Yeah. It's a rich area, like Jesse was saying. I think that's why so many of us actually write in it, because it's fascinating and we're tired of the same stale takes on, you know, vampires and werewolves and heck, even Fae. As much as I love them, you know, there are ways to spin it, but there's no, you know, there's no equivalent to like a Thunderbird or, you know, Wendigo. Wendigo is its own
distinctly
thing.
North America, distinctly North American. I don't think there's anything even African that's close to it. I mean, there might be something analogous, but let's face it, that thing is sort of a production of its environment.
Yeah,
and I mean that doesn't even count the creatures of the far north as well, up into the Alaskan wilderness and the Arctic. There's stuff up there too that the legends of from the Inuit.
Yep.
So yeah, what was that movie? Oh yeah, Pierce Brosnan in Nomads dealt with one of those. That was a really weird 1980s urban horror, where he ends up tracking these very strange Native American spirits through Los Angeles that are like, and they're like nomads. So that one is sort of a unsung classic in that regard for anybody that's interested in something a little bit different, where not an archaeologist, an anthropologist discovers these strange people that sort of exist only at night and disappear where you can't track them, and it's going through the urban jungle of Los Angeles. And the closer he gets to him, the more he tangled in. So Pierce Brosnan in a very early role after Remington Steele. So
interesting. All right. So before we get distracted and start another hour-long conversation, Jana, what are you writing right now as Jena Rey, the sci-fi and fantasy author?
I am actually working on an urban fantasy set that is set in Denver. The heroine is a half Lakota warrior. She was a holy warrior that has fallen, and now she is a thief and does all sorts of cool thiefy things. And so I'm working on finishing out that series, and hopefully we'll get the rest of that out here in the next few months. And I can be found at opalkingdompress.com, myself and the many other me's.
Okay. James, what are you writing right now?
Most recently, the third Felix Chance book, Off Chance. I actually started a chapter this evening talking about why we cover our windows at night and how it's just polite to the things outside. Exactly, you know.
They don't want to see none of that.
Wild with our order, you know, they need a break from us. Keep our firelight inside. But yeah, so I'm working on the third Felix Chance, second Pandora Squad, project I still can't talk about, and that went well today. You can find me at www.halfacrepond.com or on the Facebook at JE Pitman Writes and all the other socials at j.e.pitman.
All right, so you have Project ADD. Is there any time where you're going to finally tell us about your Chuck Tingle books, or is that still hush hush? Wait, oops, we weren't supposed to say that. All right, Jesse, what are you writing at the moment?
So I just finished beta edits on the Skinwalker story. So hopefully that'll pass publisher's muster and appear in an upcoming anthology. I'm also working on a personal project that I've talked about a little bit here. It's, like I said, kind of genreless. It's called The Holy Diver in the Midnight Sea. And that will be an upcoming antho and book series, hopefully sometime next year. Got to work out with, I'm herding cats, getting all these authors together and things like that. And that will cover a lot of Native American folklore as well, and a lot of fun things like that. Yeah, that's what I'm working on. And you can find me at outlawauthor.com or at Jesse James Fain on Instagram.
All right. And what about you, Mr. M.D. Boncher?
Not Boncher. That's a whole different name. Don't do that. Anyway, you can find me at resonantmedia.art. I also am on Substack. I have an outpost on Facebook and Insta. I know some people like the platforms. I'm getting used to it again. Anyway, what I'm working on currently is a submission for another Space Cowboys anthology for Rack Press. Let's hope I can get the deadline. And I am going to be revising a proposal for another publisher. So I'm going to be working on getting what is being titled Mech Family Robinson ready in a few months, and hopefully it's a go for liftoff, or I'll indie publish it if I have to, because it's just way too much fun. Go figure.
Indie publishing is super fun.
This is the part where I remind you, dear listener, to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right reader find the right book, so do your part. And with that, I'm going to let our guests, because some of them gave it, some of it didn't, so we're going to reiterate this for the crowd. Jana, where can listeners and readers find you?
They can find me at my website at opalkingdompress.com, or I can be found on Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, all of the things under Jena Rey or Jena Rey Author, or under a whole bunch of other things that we just won't get into, and we'll put them in the show notes.
All right, James, where can listeners and readers at home find you?
Wherever JR puts in the links, but www.hatmakerpond.com, and some variation on my name and or rights with it on the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the other places where, MD Boncher also has embassies.
Yes, embassies. There you go. I like that. You need fortresses on the frontier. Substack and Bandcamp. I have also those.
If you can't find your favorite author, but you typed in their name, add the word writer or author to it, and sometimes it pops up, because sometimes other people, believe it or not, have your name too. I really think we should be able to duel people with our names, so we can be like the one remaining. Like there can be only one.
That would be awesome.
That's what
they did that for the great Josh fights, but they have not done the Justin or the JR fights yet, so I have to wait. But so if you type writer or author, sometimes if your name is common enough, people will do that. So as a listener, if you're having trouble finding people, sometimes that's the magic bullet when you're looking for them. All right, Jesse, where can we stalk you on the internet?
Outlawauthor.com. I'm on most of the major socials minus TikTok. Can't make myself do it. I'm on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook if you want to. I'm going to warn you, that's a personal page. You're going to get a lot of firearms content and stuff like that. It's not going to be as much writing, though I do announce my writing stuff on there. And Substack. I do have a Substack. I try and put free stories on there. I also try and put just a bunch of stuff that I like on there. But I'm not blowing people up. You'll probably only hear from me about once a month.
All right, and just so you know, we do not judge you for your pink 22 caliber rifle. We won't judge your choice of firearms, but if you go to his page, you might see some things that make you question some things. Is all I'm saying.
Hey, I had to get the wife something. It was the only way to get her to start shooting.
Nothing wrong with that. Not a single thing wrong with that.
I know people with also that have ultra pink firearms, so don't feel bad.
All right, MD. So just in case when you were listening what you were writing, they missed where they could find you.
Oh.
Could you tell the listeners?
My books are available wide through Smashwords and Drafted Digital, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, you name it. You can find me out there on those sites. You can also find me, of course, on Amazon if you so choose, or buy direct from my printer, and therefore through me from my own website, resonantmedia.art. So we have all those available for you. My music is found on Bandcamp under the name Resonant One. So though you can check out my music because I score or write songs for my Tales from the Dream Nebula series as well.
All right. And you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree / Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree / Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, Blasters and Blades Podcast at gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast at gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. And if you want the shenanigans, send them Madam Stabby Stab on our Instagram, Twitter, and email, also linked in our Linktree. And finally, we have our website over on Spotify. Bunch of gobbledygook. Don't try to write it down. Just go to the Linktree, Blasters and Blades Podcast. And for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. And the cost to produce this is going up. Thank you, StreamYards. So every penny helps. Or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until they float away on a river of goodness. And it will obviously only be Coffee Brand Coffee because we are proud affiliate sponsors with them. And if you go to the link in the show notes, use the code PODCASTGRUNT, you get a discount of 10%. We get a little bit of a kickback, and you support an American company that employs Americans roasting it here. It's not a drop shipping operation like so many of these small coffee companies are. They actually make it to order, and they have lots of interesting seasonal varieties for you to check out. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy and absentee co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Unless, of course, dun, 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 the monsters get us. All right. And with that, thank you all for coming. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Jesse, thank you for herding the cats and keeping us on track, although canning was a lot of fun. I'm just saying. And with that,
on that podcast.
Yep. All right. Perfect. And with that, I'm going to hit the